applications will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise as the purpose and effect of the applications and provide any other information that's relevant. The Secretary Treasurer will summarize any correspondence on file, and from there the applicant will make can make a brief presentation if they so choose, and the public will have an opportunity to speak to the applications being considered. After the public forum, the committee will then deliberate on the proposed applications and consider a motion to either pass, defeat, or defer the decision of the applications. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are A19-27 for 311 Pratt's Road, A19-28 for 8788 Go Home Lake Shore, and number 3, A19-29 for 8638 Go Home Lake Shore. I would ask the committee members, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will ask the Secretary or Treasurer to provide us some information regarding notification.
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act.
Thank you. Our first application this morning is A19-27 for 311 Pratt's Road. To the planner, please.
Good morning. So the first application that you have in front of you is for 311 Pratt's Road, and the request is to permit the construction of an addition to an existing cottage. So they are proposing an increase in the maximum permitted gross floor area to 244 square meters, where they would be permitted 213 square meters, and an increase in the maximum permitted dwelling width to 22 meters, where they would be permitted 18.8 meters. The subject lands is Zone 6 Mile Lake Residential and designated waterfront within the 6 Mile Lake Inland Waterfront community. So you can see the subject property on the screen in black, which is located here. It is on Pratt's Road, and in this bay, right, there is a provincially significant wetland, and a positive environmental impact study was submitted with the application, and it outlined mitigation measures during development. So you can see the aerial on the screen, and you can see the existing cottage. So it's located here in the center, and you can see the existing vegetation. The area of the lot, of the whole lot, because on 6 Mile we measure the lot area in 2 ways. The whole lot is 4,261 square meters. And within 60 meters, there are 4,189 square meters, and they have a lot frontage of 75 meters. So just to give you an idea of their proposed development, it is on the screen here, and it is outlined in red. This deck they are not constructing, but it was on the survey. So based on their lot area of 4,261 square meters, they are allowed to have a gross floor area of 213 square meters. That is based on 5% of their lot area. And since they have a lot frontage of 75.25 meters, they can have a dwelling width of 18.8 meters. So they're not proposing to go closer than what's currently existing. There's this jut out at the front of the building that currently exists. So their addition, they're looking to square off that front of the dwelling, reconstruct a new entry porch at the rear, and add an addition on this side here to expand the bedrooms. So just to give you an idea of what the existing cottage looks like, so this is the rear, so coming down the driveway. So this is where that entry porch at the back of the cottage is being proposed, and they're gonna reconstruct this area. This is looking to the east, so you can see there is significant topography and vegetation buffering to the neighbor. And to the left, that will be where the porch, and to the right of this picture is where the addition at the front will be going. And this is access into the basement, into the storage area. So it's only storage, no bedrooms or anything in the basement. And with the addition, there won't be any additional gross floor area in the basement. This is a view to the shoreline, standing on the deck, and another view to the shoreline from the cottage. So this is standing down on the dock looking east, so as you can see there's that large rock outcropping. This is looking north out into 6 Mile Lake, and then looking west. So this is a view from the dock looking up towards the cottage. So as you can see, there is significant vegetation buffering the existing cottage. And then this is looking towards the existing shed that they have on their property from the dock. An existing shed on the property. And this is looking to the west. So as you can see, the subject lands is sort of engulfed in rock outcropping on the east and west side, so along the neighboring property lines. And this is a view to the addition, so that's where they're looking to do the bump out, on the west side of the cottage. And this is a view from the addition towards the shoreline. So the addition will take place behind the existing sleeping cabin. And this is looking west to that property line. And this is standing just at the end of the driveway looking to the west, so the addition will go in this area here. And this is the location of where they wanted to square off the cottage at the front. And in that area of the addition looking towards the shoreline. And looking towards the east towards the neighboring property. And standing on the deck looking to the shoreline. So here is the floor plan. So this deck is no longer going to be constructed. So they're going to propose the addition on the west to enlarge the existing bedrooms. And squaring off at the front will add an additional bedroom. And then they're looking to expand a little bit of the interior and add a new entranceway and a new porch. So the intent of the maximum permitted gross floor area is to limit massing and to create a relationship between usable space in a dwelling and the size of the lot. The intent of the maximum permitted width is to limit visual impact from a building to the shoreline and to ensure that the aesthetic quality and natural heritage of the waterfront community is protected. The official plan allows for variances to gross floor area and width, provided there's no visual impact to the shoreline. So based on the topography and existing vegetation and development, there won't be a negative visual impact to the shoreline, and very minimal of the addition will even be visible. Site plan control is a condition of approval to protect the vegetation and to implement the recommendations outlined in the environmental impact study. So overall, the application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and staff are in support of the application. The owner and agent are present if you have any questions for them, or if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Dana. Is the applicant present? Or pardon me, is there any correspondence on this application?
Yes, 4 letters of support were received.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? Is there anything you'd like to add to the planner's comments? Okay. Please give us your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Nori Siriopoulos, and I am the owner of 311 Pratt's. You went over everything beautifully. Thank you very much for that, Dana. We're a family of 6, and now that my 4 children are adults, we have significant others joining us at the cottage. The pre-existing 2 bedrooms my 4 children share right now barely fit 2 single beds in each. We are asking for a little extra room to allow for larger bedrooms, which will fit double beds, and an extra bedroom. We are not wanting to build a monster cottage, but rather tweak an already lovely, simple family cottage so that it can function as a place where we can be comfortable in and enjoy for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this application? Okay, seeing none, I will bring the application before the committee. Are there any questions or comments? Member Cooper.
Yes, thank you. I didn't even have my hand up. You were anticipating a question, right?
You're doing, it's an equal opportunity.
Wow. I'm excited. It's about time. No, I'm kidding. Listen, just a couple of quick questions. I'm trying to find the acreage is 4261 square meters. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's about an acre?
Just slightly over, yep.
Okay, thank you. And the lot coverage is going to 8.41 and, sorry, lot coverage is supposed to be 8%. What is this lot coverage?
So the 6 Mile Lake is 8%, and they are at the max 8% with the addition.
Presently?
Yes, no, with the addition.
With
So,
the addition?
Yes. And 8% within 60 meters, and I think it was 7.9 for the whole lot.
So it's 8.41 versus 8, so it's fairly close to what is allowed, is that correct?
Through you, Chair Hill, Peter Coop, they are at their max lot coverage with the addition. They aren't requesting anything
Just
over.
slightly over the maximum, is that correct? 8.41, is that what I'm reading here?
Where are you reading that? The application is for gross floor area and dwelling width. They'll comply with lot coverage.
They will comply with lot coverage.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Dempsey.
Thank you. I tried to go about 3 times, so I can imagine you're a pretty busy place. Every time there's 5 or 6 cars, and I didn't want to interrupt. It's the only times I could go. But it looks like there's not much negative to this application. You're pretty well keeping everything visual impact sound and trying to do what you can. So I have no comments or negative comments on this.
Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did visit the site, and again, I don't have any problem. The one, essentially, they're putting a roof over a deck that's already there, which is closer to the lake. The other side is hidden behind a monkey, so the view from the canoe is zero impact from my perspectives.
Member Caddo.
No, I'm in support of this.
Member Bocek.
Yeah, I did not have the pleasure of going up and doing a site visit, but I do know the property well, as I get to sit in the seat of a plow truck and do your lovely road and driveway, so I'm very familiar with the property. I have no objections to this, and just one comment that I think perhaps we're going to see more of this as families pass on their dwellings and their cottages to a younger generation that have families and are going to need more room. And this falls within the parameters of what we set out and what the 6 Mile Lake community sets out as being something that should be arbitrated and come to the Committee of Adjustments if needed. And I fully support this application.
Thank you. Member Ferguson.
While I did not complete a site inspection, I am familiar with this property. I have boated past it many, many times, and I completely agree with Dana. You know, this addition has no impact on visual impact from the lake, and I'm totally in favor of it.
Thank you. I just have one quick question for the planning department in regard to this application for this type of application. If in fact you are at your gross floor area and the width of the property, is there an as-of-right provision that allows you to expand that at some point?
So, to you, Chair Hill, we do have section 411, so based on your setback, there's a sliding scale on what you can expand by, but within the 6 Mile Lake community, they have their maximums, so you can't go over whichever is more restrictive in that sense. So if section 411 allows you to add 6 meters, but you're already at your maximum for 6 Mile Lake, which is 25% of your lot frontage, or 23 meters. If you're already at that max, you wouldn't be able to expand and you would have to come to the committee.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. Are there any other questions or comments before we take a vote? Okay. Seeing that, I will read the motion. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance A19-27 for 311 Pratt's Road to permit the construction of an addition to an existing cottage with an increase in the maximum gross floor area to 244 square meters and an increase in the maximum width of a dwelling to 22 meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development and vegetation protection areas in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And that C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Our next application is A19-28 for 8788 Go Home Lake Shore. To the planner, please.
Good morning. Our next application is A1928 for Regan and Janice Barkham, located at 8788 Go Home Lakeshore on Go Home Lake. So the purpose of the application is to permit an expansion to an existing deck in the front yard of the subject land. Specifically, a new deck is being proposed to extend 0.6 meters or 2 feet from the existing deck and have a front yard setback of 2.5 meters at its closest point. So here is the location of the subject lands, located along the west shoreline of Go Home Lake, specifically within the Four Seasons Bay area. So the property is currently designated waterfront in the township official plan and is zoned shoreline residential type 1 in the zoning bylaw. So here we have an aerial image of the property. Existing structures include a dwelling with decking, shed, and a dock. So here we have the proposed site plan as submitted. So essentially, the applicants are proposing to expand their existing deck, as you can see here in the bold outline, out towards the water by 2 feet, and a portion to the side and the rear. However, that is not part of the application. It's essentially the portion that's going towards the water that needs to be recognized. So there will be, as I said, a bit of deck expansion again to the back, but there is no anticipation of any type of tree removal to be required for any part of the deck expansion. So here we have some photos. So here is a view of the existing cottage and the deck from the existing dock. So as you can see here, this stretch of decking would be protruding out an additional 2 feet from what exists. Here we're looking from the bottom of the stairs up towards the area of the deck that is subject to the application. As you can see, there is some vegetation that does exist, but it's not anticipated that any of that is going to have to be removed. So here, standing on the deck, you can see the existing width does pose a bit of an issue when it comes to two people trying to pass each other, as I was able to experience myself. And that is essentially the purpose of this expansion, essentially to modestly increase the usability of their deck space. So here's a view from the deck towards the shoreline. And again, just illustrating the existing functionality of the deck, or lack of functionality there when it comes to having some nice Muskoka chairs. And here is a view of the rear of the cottage. So as you can see, there's quite a large rock outcrop that does steep uphill, which essentially has inhibited them to not be able to either move the cottage back or increase their decking area towards the back, and that's why this increase is being proposed. So the application is considered to be minor, and as it is of modest size and is not anticipated to create any additional visual impact from what currently exists from the shoreline or towards the adjacent land uses. We do believe that it does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and also important to note that staff are not recommending any site plan agreement control be placed on this application due to the fact that it is in regards to a deck, which is not required through the official plan to require site plan agreement, and also because there is no vegetation that appears to need any removal, we are not suggesting that as being part of the approval today. So staff do support the application, and the applicant's agent is here if you have any questions for them or myself.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence on this application?
One letter of support was received.
Okay. The applicant is here. Is there anything you'd like to add to the planner's comments?
My name is Victoria Hoffman. I'm here with Flow Drawings and Design. Our address is 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. Victoria Lemieux did a good job explaining it. It's basically the existing deck's in pretty rough shape, and they're just looking to expand it, but they want to basically make it a bit more functional. Right now, when kids are running around and stuff like that, if anybody's sitting on any chairs up top, they just get kind of nervous, so they're just looking to expand that a bit.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll take the application before the committee for questions or comments, starting with Member Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I think from the history, there's Go Home Lake really has a very short area and then a very steep, mostly rock, resulting in most cottages are massed along the shore. And that's quite normal historically here. I don't think they're asking for the world. If you look at the photographs of the original tech, it is extremely narrow. And I think even from a safety perspective, it would make great sense to widen that deck, so I don't have a problem with this application.
Thank you very much. Member Bocek?
Yeah, I have no issues with this application. I echo the sentiments of Mr. Ferguson that anything would be an improvement. Thank you.
Member Caddo?
No, I agree with my fellow members. I think it's a safety thing. Little wire's not going to hurt, I don't think.
Member Cooper?
Thank you. I don't have any concerns. It's just a question about Go Home Lake. And that is just, there, crashed here. But anyway, it says there's a high water mark and a 66-foot line there. So the high water mark is the one on the outside. I'm just trying to understand what the high water mark means exactly on Go Home Lake. It's not, I understand, isn't the lake level sort of more or less controlled?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. Essentially, it's the high water mark that, I don't know the exact number that the surveyors do pin. Yeah, I think it's, again, it's just where the water meets the land because it is controlled. I don't know in the sense of the elevation number itself, but on this plan here, that is that dark line that is illustrated.
So all I'm trying to confirm for future reference when
Yep.
we look at other applications from Go Home Lake, the high water mark is not really the same thing as we deal with in Georgian Bay then.
I see,
where,
yes.
Where there's 6 feet of swing, there's really, I don't know that it's a high water mark, it's a water level mark, isn't it?
Right, through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct. It's not like there's a difference between like current and high. It is just one, the same
It's a
level.
water
Yes,
level.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Member Demke?
I have no issues. It looks fine to me. Very minor. Thank you.
Member Matthews?
Thank you, no thank you.
Okay, seeing there's no further questions or comments, I will read the motion. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance A19-28. Is this the right one? for 8788 Go Home Lake Shore to permit an expansion to an existing deck, 26.8 square meters in the front yard of the subject lands with a minimum front yard setback of 2.5 meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And B, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Our next application this morning is A19-29 for 8638 Go Home Lake Shore. To the planner, please.
Right, so our next application is actually directly across the bay from the previous application. And the request is to permit an increase in the maximum permitted height of a detached garage to 4.7 meters, where 4.5 meters is permitted. So the subject lands is zoned shoreline residential type 1. It is designated waterfront. So just to give you a little bit of history on the application. So the applicant received a building permit for the garage, which complied. During construction, what they originally expected to be bedrock ended up being loose boulders, so those had to be removed, which resulted in the garage being taller than what they originally anticipated of the 4.5 meters. So in order to avoid blasting or bringing in large amounts of fill, to allow for a little bit of storage of non-motorized watercraft underneath the garage, the applicant has submitted a minor variance application. So as you can see, the subject lands on the screen in black. The property owner also owns the property directly abutting it as well, which is why if you went out to the property, you noticed there was a bit of cohesiveness in the design of the buildings on both lots. They all match. So here's the aerial of the subject land. So it shows the existing development and the existing vegetation. This is the site plan. So the garage is shown back here in green and the existing building. So there is an existing cottage and an existing sleeping cabin on the subject lands. And the garage is about 40 meters back from the water. So as you can see, the garage is located here at the rear of this photo, and this is the existing sleeping cabin, and this is the cottage on the neighboring property. So that's what I was referring to when they all match. So the lot lines aren't staked out exactly, so you might have, if you went out to the property, been a little bit confused on which buildings went on which lot. So this is the garage. So this is the area of that increased height. So it was originally expected to be bedrock, but when they were excavating, it ended up being loose boulders. So those had to be removed. So a garage height is from average finished grade, as opposed to where a dwelling is average natural grade. So instead of bringing in a lot of fill or blasting out the other side of the garage, they have submitted their variance application. So this is the front of garage. So as you can see, the topography changes. And this is the western side. So as you can see, this side is relatively flat. And just another view. So you can see it's relatively flat on this side. This is a view to the shoreline. So you have the existing sleeping cabin and the existing cottage. And another view to the shoreline, and that's the existing cottage. And a view to the west. And that's the existing cottage on the subject lands, located close to the water. This is the garage and that existing sleeping cabin. And a view to the shoreline. This is standing on the neighboring dock, looking up towards the garage. And a view from the shoreline, so you can see the subject lands and the neighboring property, and you can see the detached garage slightly in the back there. And another view from the shoreline towards the subject lands. These are the elevations, so it shows the topography changes. As you can see, it slopes down, which is increasing the height to the 4.7 meters. And the other sides of the garage. So the intent of the maximum permitted height is to protect the aesthetic quality of the waterfront community and to limit visual impact of structures. So the garage will not exceed the existing tree canopy. The increased height is due to site conditions and the topography. The height meets the intent of the bylaw as it will not negatively impact the aesthetic quality of the waterfront. It's in a location that complies with the bylaw, and to avoid blasting or bringing in mass amounts of fill, the applicant has submitted their minor variance to leave the increased height. So the application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and staff recommend approval of the application. The agent is here if you have any questions for her, if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Dana. Madam Secretary, do you have any correspondence on this application?
One letter of support was received.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present? Do you have any comments in addition to what the planners provided?
Again, my name is Victoria Hoffman. I'm here with Flow Drawings, 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. I'd like to also make a comment that the property owner is here of the 2 properties. Dana did a good job explaining the situation. We went for the permit process, everything was okay, but then just when they got into the construction, the topography wasn't as expected, and instead of kind of changing that section of their property quite a bit, they're just hoping to kind of get the grant and the height instead.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that would like to add additional comments? Seeing none, I'll bring the application before the committee for questions or comments, starting with Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support this. I think it makes a lot more sense to allow an extra 8 inches versus blasting rock away. So I would support this application.
Member Demke?
Yes, I would agree. The intent wasn't initially to be out of variance, so quite a surprise, I'm sure, to find out that you had to. But it's so minor that I totally support this.
Member Cooper?
I don't have any issues. I just wanted to ask a question about the actual verbiage in the application. It says the applicant is proposing to construct. It's already been constructed, is that correct?
As through you, Chair Hill, that is correct. It's not finished, but it's been partially constructed, almost finished.
Clarification, thank you.
Thank you. Member Caddo?
No, I'm in support of this because I know the area here sure could be solid rock, and 2 feet away you could drop 10 feet once you start digging. So it's I'm in support of this.
Member Bocek?
Yeah, I have no issues with this. Really, it's sad to see it actually has to come here for such a minor thing. And to change the pitch on the roof from a 512 and the weather conditions we have here isn't worth it. And to bring fill in on that lake, you need to be a billy goat to get up most of the rock walls there. So I completely support this and feel kind of embarrassed that it has to come here for 8 inches of approval. Thank you.
Member Ferguson?
I also support this application. I think it's a case of welcome to Muskoka. The minute you put a shovel in the ground, you just never know what you're going to be left with.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a quick question of planning again. Not necessarily for this application, but if there were some landscaping done on this property that obviously would, let's say you had a rock garden in front of that, would that then change the building height requirement? If they built a rock garden in front of where those piers are, like to what extent do you need to go to change the, where you're taking the measurement for the maximum height?
To you, Chair Hill. So we take it from average finished grade. So if they were to bring the whole entire grade up on that side where it's lower, so if they were to fill in to bring that whole grade up, it would have to be from the front all the way to the back underneath the piers on both sides. Then that would change their height.
Yeah, and just because, so if that extra fill or rock garden or whatever just came out to the end of the last pier, then that's where you take the measurement?
Yep, so we take it from average finished grade, so on all 4 sides of the building. So on this side here, so where that's measured on the screen, from average finished grade. So they would have to bring in that, probably that 18, or the 8 inches, sorry, of fill all the way around on that side in order to bring those numbers down.
Okay. That's great, appreciate that clarification. And if there are no further questions or comments, I'll read the motion. Be it resolved that Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance number A19-29 for 8638 Go Home Lake Shore to permit a detached garage and an increase in the maximum permitted height from 4.7 meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas in a manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Okay, that is the end of our public applications at this time. We also have one additional application that is not subject to public meeting, which is application number A18-45 for 20 Island 1900 in Georgian Bay. This application was presented previously and was deferred to this meeting. So to the planner, please.
All right, so the last application you have in front of you was heard in February, and it was deferred for a site visit in the summer or spring months and to have the dwelling staked out. So just to refresh your memory, I'll try not to go into too much detail, but it has been a while since we've heard it. The application is requesting a reduced setback to the high water mark. So at Georgian Bay, this is the 177.4 contour elevation to a dwelling where 20 meters is required to 14.8 meters. Just to give you an idea again where the subject property is, it is within the Cognishine coastal waterfront community and it is designated waterfront. The property is currently vacant and the hold was removed back in October of 2018. And just again, the aerial. So the area of the reduced setback is this neighboring lot line where the 177.4 contour goes through into the bay at the back. So staff did a second site visit and during high water, as we all know, the water is very high right now. And there was a small amount of water in this area here, but it did not go all the way through to the other side, and it won't extend up to where that building envelope is. And I do have some updated photos just to give you a better idea. So just to show you again the proposed site plan. So there is the cottage proposed here and the septic there. And I just zoomed in a little bit to show you where that high water mark is and where it cuts across to the abutting bay. And it was this area here where a small amount of water came through, but not enough for it to ever be navigable. And there is a steep elevation, probably about 9 meters in this area here. And then the cottage is set back away from that. So this is the previous site plan. So if you went out to the property, it was staked showing the previous and the new. So the new ones were flags. Hopefully they were still there when you went out. They put them out when I went out with them a couple weeks ago. But there is the existing flag. It was hanging in a tree to show where this edge of the corner was going to be. So there is a steep grade change there and mature vegetation that would need to be removed. And I have some photos to show that. So this is that building envelope. And this is a view to the shore. And then this one here would be where that front wall is. So as you can see, a bit of the tape was they were staking it out when we were out on site. And the building envelope here. So as you can see, there's a relatively flat area. The previous building envelope, you can kind of see the flag here, just marking where it was, but there is a grade change over there, and I did try to take a picture from it as best I could. So this is just a view from the shoreline. Another view to the shoreline, so there's that natural open area there. So this is that area of lowland, so you can see the property stake where the high water mark cuts through, but on this end there was no water that got into this area. And this is just standing within the lowland, so as you can see there is significant mature vegetation in this area. And this is the area where it got a little bit wet, but not enough for it to be navigable or impact the proposed dwelling area. So this was that elevated area that I was talking about. So the dwelling will be set back beyond that. So it's about 9 meters or so, or 30 feet. And again, just showing that elevated land. So this is looking towards where that existing dock, which was falling apart, was. And again, the elevated. So this is the previous corner. So there was a flag just marking it, but the stake was actually down that slope. So as you can see the stake there. So there was that drop off, and that would require the height to be increased and the vegetation to be removed in this area. So the previous corner was this stake here, and they have shifted it 5 meters. So you can see the stake here. So the bar that was there, that's about the middle of the front wall of the cottage now, and it was previously, that was the closest corner. So they've shifted it over about 5 to 6 meters. So again, that was the previous envelope over there, and they've shifted it over into this flat area, so they don't have to remove any vegetation besides some small shrubs. Just a refresher on what it looks like. It is a 1-story cottage. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. So the application was deferred in order to be staked out and to allow for a summer site visit. So there was comments and concerns received from the public about the septic not being clear on the site plan. So the septic, as I showed you, was on the site plan. Concerns with the setback to the septic, that it was too close to the rear lot line. I'm just going to go back the full survey. So the rear lot line as defined in our zoning bylaw is opposite or farthest from the front lot line, which would make this lot line here the rear lot line. And then they would have 3 interior side lot lines. So the zoning bylaw requires a 5-meter setback to that interior side lot line. So the septic is actually 6 meters, so it does meet the zoning bylaw, and it is 30 meters from the high water mark as well on that side. The rear yard actually only requires a 4-meter setback for an accessory structure, so it does meet the zoning bylaw requirements. There has been a building permit issued for the septic, so it does comply with zoning and building code. So just wanted to go over that. So staff's recommendation has not changed from the application, as it does meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. And the intent of the setback to the high water mark is to ensure structures are set back from the water and for vegetation protection. So the area will not require vegetation to be removed, with the exception of some small shrubs. And the area of the lowlands will not become navigable, and it is elevated significantly above that. So if water were to come in here, it wouldn't reach where the dwelling is going to be. Site plan control will be applied to the property to protect the vegetation, and the building is utilizing an area that is naturally flat and less visible from the water. So staff recommend that the application be approved as it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you very much, Dana. Madam Secretary, is there any additional correspondence on this application?
There has been no additional correspondence received.
And correspondence received so far was how many?
I believe it's 6 letters.
Some in favor and some opposed?
Yes, as Dana stated, there were some concerns in some of the letters.
Yeah. Okay, I noticed in your comments, Dana, you had addressed some of the concerns from those letters that we received in opposition. I see no one else in the room, so there's not much need to ask for comments from the application. I beg your pardon. Is there anyone who would like to add additional comment or questions for this application?
No, thank you. Full respect for the committee with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's a closed meeting. Yeah. Is he public? I think he's internal. Okay. All right, seeing none, I will bring it before the committee for questions or comments, starting with Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, I just have one question to planning, and that is the septic location. This is becoming very important to all applications coming in, and we have a setback that we require for the septic systems. I'm wondering, because I don't know, and maybe planning can help me, is there a parameter to do with elevation for septic systems? Because our high water mark on Georgian Bay is 177.4. The elevation of this septic system is at 182, which seems to be fairly safe and we'll probably never get water unless we have a 40-day, 40-night flood. But is there any, in the official plan or anywhere in our zoning bylaws, is there any reference to the elevation of which a septic bed has to be above the high water mark?
Yes, through you, Chair Hill. Yes, so a septic has to be 1 meter above the 178.3 contour. So they're at 182, so they're well above the
And
requirements.
is that a provincial standard or is that a bylaw of the township?
In our zoning bylaw,
In our
whether it's
zoning bylaw?
provincial, I can't answer that.
Okay. Well, I guess my only comment would be that, you know, I don't have an issue with this application, but moving forward, due to the climate change and the change in water levels out there, maybe we should revisit that at council and see if there's a need to increase that amount. But I have no issues with this one in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bocek. If I could just go back to your response to that, Dana. Councillor Bocek asked what was the minimum elevation above the high water mark. So is the high water mark that we're referring to here 177.4?
Yes, to you, Chair Hill, the high water mark is the 177.4. A septic has to be elevated 1 meter above the 178.3.
And what is the 178.3? Is that the meter?
Through Mr. Chair, in this instance, the minimum required elevation, so it's in table 4.5 of the zoning bylaw in section 4.26 that deals with septic systems. It is, and the last row of that table establishes a minimum elevation for treatment units and leaching bed components of septic systems. So 170, the minimum elevation for all treatment units and leaching bed components is 178.4, which is 1 meter above the high water mark. If you're on an island that's subject to wave rush up, in the fetch of Georgian Bay, which we have maps that identify which islands are subject to those, then the minimum elevation is 178.9, so it's 50 centimeters higher. If you're in the Go Home Bay coastal waterfront community, you're required to be 1 meter above the 178.3 elevation. So Go Home Bay has a separate elevation that they apply in that coastal waterfront. So that's what the bylaw currently contains with respect to opening or minimum elevations of septic systems.
So Go Home Bay has an additional height because the cottage association there has requested it, or how does it get a higher level?
I'm not sure of the specific history, but I would assume it's related to their community plan that was developed for that community.
Okay, thank you. That was it, Councillor Bocek? Yes. Okay, Member Caddo?
No, I'm in support of it. The only thing for planning, maybe get, I do this every day, I'm out there, and it was even hard for me to kind of figure out where things were, is if they could maybe mark on the wood stakes, proposed building or proposed septic, and so when we go out there, you can say, okay, well, this is exactly where they want it. So maybe it's just a suggestion for the, you know, for the future.
Yeah, we can do that.
I agree with you on that one. Any comments, Member Ferguson?
I was not able to complete a site inspection, and so I'm going to defer to those who have.
Member Cooper?
First of all, I wish I'd had the opportunity to make a site inspection. Unfortunately, I was tied up in other matters related to the township that day. However, I don't necessarily have an issue with this. I would like to thank the planning department for bringing this forward at a time of year when we can look at the land. And I would encourage that in the future. I think it's critically important to see the site, and it's pretty hard to do that in January. So I'm delighted that we've moved this to a time when we can all examine this very carefully. Thank you.
Member Demke?
Yes, I had the opportunity to visit the site too. You know, there's not much room to move on this, I think. I'm assuming if they could move slightly to the left, they would never even had to apply, but that downgrade won't allow them to move any further over. Left if you're looking at the water, sorry.
Yes, through you, Chair Hill, they originally intended or wanted to comply with that 20-meter setback, but then it was pushing them over that slope there, so
Yeah.
they moved it over so that they could keep it in that naturally flat area and not have to remove any vegetation.
Yeah, on that whole property, there's almost nowhere else to put the building and everything where it's situated. So I have no problem with it. It was an interesting visit. Thank you,
Member Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would echo Member Caddo's because I was there probably 2 months ago for a site visit. There was some strings, there was the odd flag. I was there about 10 days ago again, and about the only real site or staking I could see was about a 1/4-inch rod drilled into the rock. There's little bits of string and stuff. It was very, very difficult to envision where the cottage might be and what that one stake measured, or what the ground mark for that was. Being fairly familiar with it, I guess my question to you, Dana, would be, to the south, there is that cliff, as you mentioned, about 9 meters, and it is a very steep cliff falling right off. And so we're measuring from the high water mark, but what's the elevation of the cottage? Because I'd be hard pressed to think that even after Member Bocek said 40 days and 40 nights that any water's going to get near the cottage. It's so elevated up there.
Pull out the survey. Through you, Chair Hill. This line here, it just goes about the corner, is the 183 contour. And then the 184 contour, this one that cuts through kind of the back where it says 7.87 meters,
Right.
is that one there.
So then, further, if I may, Dana, do you drop sort of a vertical line at the edge of the property and measure horizontally back to the building? Like, what's this 14, is it 14 meters or something setback now? Like, is it just like a right angle measurement?
Your Chair Hill, yes, it's a bird's eye view.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually visited the site several times, and trying to find those stakes was a challenge. But having looked at the other options that the applicant has to locate that, I think that's the best choice. You know, it's bald rock, and certainly not going to have an impact on the vegetation that's there. It's stuff that's growing in bald rock is pretty hard to replant if you had to. So I am definitely in favor of that. There was some additional flagging done with a bunch of little wire flags that were set along the side, and I don't think that would be representing high water mark, because we're at the high level now. The most current reading, I think, is 177.38. So we're virtually at other than a couple of centimeters to the high water mark, and those flags are quite a bit above the water level that exists out there. So there must be something else. I found that there was like 6 or 7 different flags on that site, so you had to be creative to try and figure out which ones of those were going to be used. But having done that, I do agree that the applicant has made a good choice. So I am in favor of the application. Are there any other questions or comments before I read the motion? Seeing none, I will read the motion. These are all signed. Okay. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance A18-45 for 20 Island 1900 Georgian Bay to permit a reduction in the minimum required setback from the high water mark 177.4 contour elevation to a dwelling to 14.8 meters, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development and vegetation protection areas in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Our next motion is to do with the minutes of the July 12th, 2019 meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will read the motion. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes of July 12th, 2019 as amended and circulated. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And our final motion for today, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now at 10:00 hours, does now adjourn at 10:00 hours until September 13th, 2019 at 0900 or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.